A question I get frequently these days is, does it make more sense to rent or buy? So everybody has heard that, oh, it makes more sense to own because you are building equity. Absolutely true. However, it's not the only factor to consider. So there are some potential advantages to renting. One is, if you're not sure you're going to remain in the area, then it's probably a better idea not to buy. You've got a lot greater flexibility when you rent to just be able to, at the end of your lease, leave. You don't have closing costs. You don't have to wait until you've sold a house to go move somewhere else and rent or buy something. So it certainly gives you better ability to leave and go to another area. As a tenant, obviously, you also have many fewer costs up front. While you may have to pay first month, last month, and security deposit, that's definitely going to be less than you would pay in a down payment and closing costs were you to purchase a house. So definitely, financially, it's a lot easier to rent, at least on the front end. What I mean by that is that the longer you rent, the more money you're, quote, throwing away. So you don't have an asset to sell, but more about that later. The other reason why it's advantageous to rent is that tenants aren't responsible for maintenance in general. If the roof needs to be replaced or something like that, that's the landlord's problem. So again, from a financial and a headache perspective, not having to worry about maintenance can be an advantage. So back to the building of equity. There's a disadvantage in renting that no matter how much you pay, you're not building any equity. So if you rent for 8 years or 10 years, all of those rental payments are just gone. Versus if you had been starting to pay down a mortgage, while yes, some of the money that you pay on a mortgage is interest and it's not part of the principal, the value, the true value of the house, after 8 years living in a home, you will have paid down some of the principal that you've borrowed. And in theory, the value of the house has gone up. So when you sell, you get some money back for all of those payments that you've done in a mortgage that you wouldn't as rent. Another disadvantage to being in a rental is you have no control over how long your landlord decides to allow you to stay there. You may have a situation where the landlord decides to sell the property and then you have to go find another place to live. Not ideal. You also pay for an increase in rent when it goes up. The landlord can say, I'm adding $100 a month to your rent. When you have a mortgage, say a 30-year mortgage, that payment is the same for all 30 years, all 12 months. It doesn't go up unless your taxes go up, which they will. So your payment goes up a little bit, but it's not an increase that reflects an increase in value like rent. That's going to go up much more per year than any mortgage payment would. And then there are the repairs. So while they're not your responsibility financially, you're still dependent on the landlord to either fix them or get somebody out there to fix them in a timely fashion, which is not always easy. Similarly, there may be rules and restrictions that the landlord has that you may not like very much, but again, you have no control over them. So whether you're allowed to have a pet is one of the biggest ones. One more thing is that you can't put necessarily a very personal stamp on where you live. Some landlords don't allow you to hang certain things or paint, or if you wanted to add a mudroom, obviously, you're not going to be able to do that in a rental. There are also no tax benefits to renting. When you own, there are certain tax advantages and write-offs that you can take as a homeowner that are not available to you as a tenant. So clearly, there are both pros and cons to renting. Same goes for owning. So what are the advantages to owning a house? Equity is the first one that comes to mind. As you pay your mortgage payments down, you are building equity and ownership such that when you sell the house, you have the money that you have to pay back for anything you still owe on the mortgage, but the rest you get to keep, obviously outside of closing costs and any other required fees. Then there is stability. Nobody can kick you out the way that they can in a rental if the landlord decides to sell. So you have the stability of being able to stay in your property as long as you want, assuming for health and job and other financial reasons that there's nothing causing you to leave. When it comes to repairs, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're responsible for making them and maintaining the house and its upkeep. However, at least you get to choose how and when those repairs are made and by whom. So you have a little bit of control. You can also personalize any home that you own to the extent that you want to, and that can be a big bonus, especially because you want your home to feel homey. So versus renting, you can definitely make it more yours. And again, there are tax benefits to owning a home. Now, it's not all peaches and cream. There are some negatives or some challenges as well to being a homeowner. For example, you have significant upfront costs. You have a down payment and closing costs and moving costs, so you do need a lot of cash in hand to purchase a home. You have to pay for all of those maintenance and repair issues that I just mentioned. There's also less flexibility. Let's say you do need to move for job purposes or something. You have your money tied up in your home. So until you sell that house, you may not have the money to go somewhere else. So owning one home and trying to purchase another can be a little bit difficult. So it's certainly less flexible. You can't just leave on a whim. So again, pros and cons to both renting and owning. There's not one answer that's right. You have to figure out what your lifestyle is like, what your finances are like in order to make the most informed decision.